bit differently this week. This week, Tawanda, who is Tyrone West's sister, has been invited to speak on a panel called I Can't Breathe, a community conversation on equity in policing. With that panel, the discussion is going to be starting at 7 o'clock, which is a little bit later than we normally start. And so for the gap, we're going to be playing a video about the meeting that the West family had with State's Attorney Greg Bernstein. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the video. Once 7 o'clock rolls around, I'm going to be patching in the Zoom panel discussion so that everybody can watch. As always, thank you all for tuning in and for continuing the fight for justice for the victims of all police brutality. Mic check, mic check.
Well, first of all, good morning. My name is Greg Bernstein. I'm the state's attorney. And I think maybe a good way to begin, if it's okay with Mr. Pettit, is why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves to each other. And we're not taking any video of this, please. So if you could remove the camera from the office. We're having a meeting, and we're not going to be filming this. So I'd like you please to remove the camera.
All right, we standing out here. We just got out of a meeting with Greg Bernstein, who looked my family in our face with lies and, basically what's happening right now. He just basically did what he's always known for doing. He let 10 murderers loose. He's not going to charge them the same way they killed Anthony Anderson, wasn't charged, and that's why my brother's here. Had he would have prosecuted those officers then, my brother wouldn't even be here. So again, he let murderers go, but we're not going to fight it. We're not going to not fight it. We're going to fight this thing to the end. We're not going to give up. So this is our big step. He thinks that he's just going to tell us that and we're just going to fall back. We still doing our West Winds. We taking this above him. He literally lied in our face. I asked him about all the police. I put up all their things, what they did, the peace orders, the brutal beatings, all that. He said that was administrative. They had nothing to do with this. How in the hell that doesn't have nothing to do with this? If they didn't have no reason to stop my brother over there, what he would say, oh, he was backing the vehicle up and it looked like something, And first of all, he's driving too slow. He's driving on a block where a school is, where kids in a stop, approaching a stop sign. Are you kidding me? Like, they had no reason to brutally murder and beat and kill my brother. They lied. So again, my family has been deprived. We have more answers, more questions than answers. None of our questions have never been answered yet. What's the day on there? What?
Day 154. 22 weeks, 5 months. But we did find out something very interesting. The two officers who arrived on the scene first, Ruiz and Chapter. These names keep popping up. They mysteriously end up in these places all the time. Where people end up beaten or murdered. They're always on the scene. Why is that? We didn't get anything resolved today. The only thing we got was the information we needed to keep pressing forward. Our family won't stop. If anything, you gave us more strength to push forward. These are criminals. You sat there and explained to us how you have to sit them down and hold their hands, and they have to speak to 5 and 6 people before they can either be interrogated or no. You don't call it interrogation, you call it interviewed. And you're not writing anything down, and it's not formalized. You're asking them a series of questions that they can sit down and memorize like a script, and then have it presented to corroborate with the other officers that are involved. We need to know who the one officer is from Morgan State University, and also we need to know who the one officer is who declined to be interviewed. Why did they not stand with the rest of their brothers in blue?
And not only that, we also need to know why they took so long. And pay attention to the time frame in which they took to release him this autopsy. They were waiting for it to come up, the cover up of the medical examiner, because all of them in cahoots together. Now I don't trust them. I want a second autopsy done on my brother. ASAP. I don't trust nothing, because they all cooperate with each other within this little sick circle, and we about to break them all out of this sick circle. You gonna wait all this time to tell us something? Then, amazingly, he's brought a fort with 10 people, no weapons in his hand. Roll that fort with 10 officers. None of them had 15 minutes, you fighting one man, you fighting with men and women. Took 15 minutes, but then he says, oh, he got out the car really peacefully and cooperated and gave them permission to search the car. Get the hell out of here.
He was pulled out of his car by his locks. We know that. Eyewitness account told me they beat Tyrone. They couldn't even see him because all those police officers had him covered from head to toe. He was kicked, he was tased, he was maced, and he was beaten. How dare you, Bernstein, look at my family's face and lie to us. This man needs to go. He never needs to be state's attorney ever again for the city of Baltimore. He cannot be trusted. He's a liar, and he knows he's a liar. Shame on you, Bernstein. Shame on you.
So I guess y'all gonna go celebrate. Y'all probably done shook your little coffee mugs together and cheering each other on. How the hell the police gonna, interview the police and y'all all working together? That's just like I go commit a crime today. I'm gonna arrest myself and I'm gonna let myself free. Get the hell out of here. That's a bunch of crap. But we won't stop. That just gave us more fuel in our tank to fight to say we're gonna fight to the end. So I'm telling you, from going forward, all of y'all that's helping this thing up, y'all gonna put all of y'all all of y'all foul, y'all all going down together. Look at my face, y'all all going down. Y'all all had the time to throw each other on the bus, but instead y'all wanna try to
cover up? You all going down.
The sheets out that bus, and I promise you, all of y'all going down. Because we getting a second autopsy. Look at my face, second autopsy. So all that bull crap he died of his whatever, cardiac arrest. Get the hell out of town.
And for those 10 officers, I hope you enjoy your holiday. Because you left a family with a man that you murdered. We have to live with this. Enjoy your holiday. I don't see how you can, but you enjoy your holiday, okay? Knowing you murdered a man.
And the sad part about it, some of y'all are mothers and some of y'all are fathers, and y'all have kids, and it might not happen to your family, then I wouldn't wish this on nobody. But beware, when it come back and bite you, remember Tyrone West.
Tyrone West.
Tyrone West.
Tyrone West.
And always know this, God has the last answer. The last answer. You might have gotten away with it with Bernstein, but God has the last answer. And Bernstein, you got to go.
Bernstein must go.
Bernstein office is a license to kill.
Yes,
and you better be careful with that because you caused a whole lot of trouble around here. I'm telling you, the city is all upset. A license to kill, Bernstein. That's all you have is a license to kill, and you use it. But you're going to have to stop because it's extremely dangerous.
But I promise you, Tyrone West's name is going to make you stop. I promise you. Because we're not your typical family that you just give the news and we're going to set it down. We might even do a West Tuesday and a Wednesday. How about that? 2 days.
Well, now you know, the West family's going to stick together in this. We came down here to Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, Greg Bernstein. We knew what he was going to say because he doesn't have a history of prosecuting any police officers who does wrong. We know what he was going to say. We just wanted to sit in that room with him and look at his face. Greg Bernstein is a total misconcept for a state's attorney.
Disgrace.
His investigation was not complete. He told us we posed questions to him that he could not answer. We posed questions that said you needed to get back into the investigation. Once you get back into it, will it have a bearing on the case? His answer was no.
And then I had the question, I had the nerve to ask him this question, he couldn't even answer. I said, well, forget everybody and what they say. Did you see the videos? This man had the nerve to tell me he saw just the ones that was on the news. He didn't even look at the videos. He saw them, but you can tell me you ain't looking. You know you saw them brutally beat my brother to death.
Yes, he did.
You know you saw it. You were talking about, oh, I just saw the little clip that you saw on the news. You know you saw the whole video, but I hope you enjoyed that video, you sick bastard.
And then even at that, in his talk with us, We knew that it was 9 Baltimore City police officers that beat my nephew, but he only stated that it was like 6 or 7. He didn't call all of them out. As a matter of fact, we brought to his attention also Nicholas Davis Chapman and also Jorge Ruiz, who's been involved in the incidents, and he said, no, as a matter of fact, I know that they were not involved.
Yes, he did.
But then he turned around when I said, well, a reporter told me that if they wasn't charged in Anthony Anderson, brutal death beat, that these names could be like falsified names or whatever. So he was like, oh, well, I didn't hear that. Whatever, get out of here. We won't be able to slander nobody's name if it wasn't
and he's
true.
covering it up. What else is he covering
What
up?
else is he covering up?
You know, he did not tell us that this autopsy report was completely independent. We know that the autopsy report is not independent because they use the word police restraint. How can a body step up and say I was restrained by the police?
Thank you.
The body can't step up and say that. So the autopsy report has to be biased
to begin with
the police. They wouldn't have said that if it had not have been. Otherwise, how would they have known what had happened? And then he's going to say that these officers did not make statements. How did they know that they were going to be facing criminal charges? How did they know that?
You know how they knew? When they saw my dead brother's body laying there, that's how they knew. That's how they knew.
And Greg Bernstein is just a total failure. Total failure.
But you know what? I thank God that we all are Christians standing out here, and God is so good.
Yes, He is.
I just felt like I left the gates of hell looking at Greg Bernstein. I thought I was looking at Satan himself, and I don't ever want to see Satan himself ever again. So I'm gonna keep walking this godly Christian life. It's just saying I don't ever want to burn in hell with Greg Bernstein and the rest of them officers.
Be reminded, this is not a letdown for us. No, certainly not. It's not a letdown. It's a pick-upper. Because we know what he was going to say. We came down here expecting.
We prayed up. We came prayed up.
So that's not going to stop us. Like I said, we knew what he was going to say, and it was not a letdown for us. We knew it. As a matter of fact, the whole city of Baltimore knew what he was going to say. Everybody knew that he wasn't going to prosecute these officers, but they were just going to give him one last chance. Why give him a chance? Greg Bernstein is nothing but I'm not going to say it.
A racist state's attorney, because if it's not his color or whatever, he don't care. Flat out, I'm going to say it. He don't care. We just another black family. Oh, they'll get over it. Oh, we'll just give them a payoff settlement. They'll go. Money can't bring my damn brother back.
Not a penny. And for all my black brothers out there driving while black, be very careful. Because Bernstein don't give a damn. These killer cops are still out there. Be careful, because they're going to pull you over with the intent to murder you. Nicholas Davis Chapman and Ruiz. Be careful. They're murderers.
Do what my brother wasn't able to do. Call 911.
Don't think that the West family is going to stop.
We not.
Please don't think that we're going to stop.
Never.
This is not justice.
No, it's not.
This is not justice. West family wants justice. And Greg Bernstein has not dispensed justice since he's been in that office. I mean, it's a total shame. It's a total shame that he has not done that. And we are not going to stop.
No, we're
I
not.
guess he's going to be on the news in about like a half hour with his big smile on and saying that the police act was within reason and blah, blah, he's sorry. You don't know what sorry is. You're sorry. You got that right. You're sorry.
Sorry excuse was state attorney.
But until that happens to your family, your loved ones, you won't know our pain.
Until that happens to you.
It's going to happen. Something's going to happen to you because God don't like
ugly.
And when it do, think about my
Think about Tyrone West.
Tyrone West.
You should have made it right.
All those other ones that you let get brutally murdered. Think about, I wish I had a list of all the homicides you said that was by your officers that you didn't even prosecute, that you just let go and you didn't even take us through the due process. But we going over you, buddy.
Now, for everybody who's watching this right now, you see how powerful and how united my family is, the West family? You can do the same. You can stand with us. You can stand against this injustice. You can stand against this system that has been pushing us down for entirely way too long. We have no rights. They don't even treat us like citizens. It's going to continue until we raise up and we fight back. The first thing you need to do is understand your right to vote. If you don't like what's going on, get them out of here. Start from the top, and work your way down.
Next year.
Yeah.
Start with the mayor. You can start with the city council. Remember, next year is a very important year. You don't like what you see, you don't like what's going on, you could be next. Your family could be next. Get them out of here, tear it all down, and rebuild it, so it's for the citizens
He
again.
know he get ready to get out of that chair, but I thought he would have a little bit of dignity in getting out the chair by making himself trying to redeem his name. I thought he would have had, but when you know, if you don't have no class, no dignity or nothing, no aim and morals about yourself, of course you want to go out with a bang, but it's okay. I hope when you go up for election, we will be right there, and I'll make sure nobody votes
For you, Bernstein, you're out.
So bye-bye, Bernstein.
And justice is spelled W-E-S-T.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, justice. Definitely gonna get it.
I wish we could have had a video camera in on that, but you could just see the smirk,
The stone face.
the look on his face. You could look right past it
Nasty.
and see what he was going to say, even though we knew what he was going to say.
Yes, we did.
But that look on his
The
face,
I don't care look.
that look, it's exactly, that's what my sister-in-law said, that I don't care what you say. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to prosecute any police officers in Baltimore City for whatever they do.
But he said that at the beginning of the door that all police officers were his friend. We knew that coming into the door. But guess what? We know that when you're on your way out the door. Because I promise you, we're going to make sure the whole city don't vote for you, buddy. So I hope you enjoy, you know, letting all these bloody murder counts go. But I promise you, you're out, buddy. So enjoy the chair. I promise I'm snatch all the legs from under that chair. Best to believe.
No justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
Justice for Tyrone West.
Justice for Tyrone West.
Justice for Tyrone West.
Justice for Tyrone West. 10 officers, one man, one unarmed, healthy man that y'all brutally murdered.
10 officers.
One man.
I wouldn't be there already.
Okay. Why can't we go in? Are we allowed? Why exactly can't we go in?
Mr. Savage to be with you shortly.
Family members can't come in to a press conference about.
It hasn't begun yet, sir.
Yeah, I understand that. But what's the difference between?
You can ask Mr. Savage.
All right, so
The gentleman that escorted you up here.
I'm here.
When I get ready, I'll let you in.
I understand, but what's the holdup?
Can you step back for a second? Mr. Savage explained it to this gentleman here when they get off the elevator, so we're just hanging tight for a second.
He didn't explain anything to me. That's why I'm trying to speak to him.
Explained it to you twice.
You didn't explain anything. You said,
I said, when Mr. Savage comes back to the door, he'll fight you guys inside. That's what I said. Now breathe.
and the question I was asking was, why can't we go in now? What's the difference between media setting up and me setting up? You know, like,
Good question. You can ask Mr. Savage.
are we not allowed? So you're saying we're not allowed at the press conference?
I'm asking you to step on the elevator. We're going to go downstairs, and you'll be brought up when it's appropriate.
When would that be? After
I'm not the person that can answer all these questions.
Mr. Savage?
Yeah, let's just observe. Yeah, our lawyer's working.
I'm sorry?
Yes, lawyer's working. Let's go.
What's that?
Let's go. It's not necessary.
So they're not gonna let us.
So I'm gonna give you a lawful order. Step onto the elevator. Because at this point you're gonna be trespassing. We need you to get onto the elevator.
Y'all are some clowns. Y'all are straight up clowns.
We went from waiting on the 11th floor to being invited into the press conference to having to wait in the lobby like servants, like master, like we work in a field, master. You gonna let us into the big house because it's cold outside. Then you gonna have us to wait outside still, and then we're told to leave the lobby of the 11th floor and come all the way back downstairs to the first floor. I don't know what type of tomfoolery y'all trying to pull here, man, but the fact of the matter is, you're having a press conference about our loved one. We have the right to be there.
Why would they tell the family of Tyrone West to go downstairs and giving you a lawful order to go downstairs when they're allowing other people to come into that conference?
And they talk about transparency? Transparency? But you send us from in there, this our relative. You let everyone else in there except for us.
Those people are not related to Tyrone. We are. We would just want
They just want Greg Bernstein to tell us little lies that they did.
They even called on the police radio to send help. As a matter of fact, here come 2 officers now.
All we wanted was transparency and accountability and some integrity to this investigation. We're going on today's day 154. That's 22 weeks. That's 5 months. And we still don't have answers. We have way more questions than we do answers. We've been getting double talk and a lot of tomfoolery and circle jerkery going on. First, the partial autopsies were revealed a few days before Thanksgiving, disheartening to our family. And now this autopsy report or the end of the investigation that's not going to lead to criminal charges is released a few days before Christmas. How crass and insensitive is that?
And then the way he did it was really disgusting. Like, he had enough respect for my family, and then he's up there showing you guys a PowerPoint. He didn't show us a PowerPoint. I had my own. 10 officers and 1 unarmed man equals murder. And that's what they did. But we're not going to stop it. We're not going to stop it. Now we ain't going to stop it up to not only a Western, but a Tyrone Tuesday and a Western.
And we keep getting contradicting information. Some of the officers weren't interviewed. They're saying they interviewed them all. They're saying they didn't interview them all. They're saying one officer refused to be interviewed. We're getting all these different stories and we still don't have the complete picture. All we know is there were anywhere from 8 to 10 officers on the scene on July 18th, and we have 1 dead relative as a result. They're the only answers we have.
When Greg Bernstein said he wanted to meet with the family and be transparent about this investigation, at our meeting with him, he specifically told us that his investigation was not complete. He had not interviewed all the officers. None of the officers had any marks on them. So it's a clear indication that there is a cover-up. And he refused to even address the issue that 2 of the officers were involved in 2 murders within 1 year and 1 brutal beating.
He said that's an administration issue.
And that wouldn't have any influence on the case with Tyrone West being brutally beaten and murdered. He said there was no evidence of that at all. And that is definitely not true because we never got a complete autopsy report.
And he did identify the officers who responded initially, who enacted this traffic stop.
Nicholas Davis Cheney and Roulette, the same ones we were calling out names as bloody murderers that's been beating people up and had killing them.
He reminded that these two officers have criminal records in and of themselves. Also, Nicholas David Chapman has been convicted of driving around with unauthorized plates on his car. Also, Paulette has been imported from Florida with a child support case behind him, and still with his paycheck being resolved. Also, what's her name, Danielle Lee? Yes. She has a peace order or a protective order, and according to the Maryland gun law, she's not even supposed to be in possession of a firearm or a weapon when you have these type of orders against you. But yet still, they're still allowed to go around and patrol the streets and arrest our citizens and beat our people and kill our people. This is totally insane.
And then they barred us from the 11th floor. We wasn't doing nothing but standing out there. They're talking about my brother that they brutally murdered, and we couldn't go in there while he tell y'all a bunch of lies.
And they want to talk about transparency.
How is that transparent?
That's not transparent. We had a wooden door closed in our face.
You gotta be kidding me. Are you serious?
They said, I'm giving you a specific direct
lawful order.
In other words, they're going to arrest every member of the West family
for requesting accountability.
For requesting to hear what was going on at a press conference of which we were supposed to be a part of.
Exactly. So how's that transparent? That's what I want. No, and it's still not complete all the way.
It's still partial.
It's still partial. We want this whole.
It's still missing the outsourced toxicology and the outsourced pathophysiology. If you guys go back to all of your references, you guys put out there that Ahmed requested outside help. Exactly. But they're still saying they don't have that. So in essence, it's still partial, it's still incomplete. We still don't have answers.
And how can an investigation be complete when State's Attorney Greg Bernstein himself stated that he interviewed all the officers except 1? You have to get statements from everybody involved. And he admitted that we have statements from all officers except one. Who's this one officer? Why doesn't he step up?
And we're still getting conflicting information from Deputy Commissioner Rodriguez stating that the officers hadn't been interviewed. State's Attorney Bernstein stating that they have been interviewed. Where is it here? And then he went on to reference the timeline and said, well, some were interviewed before and during. We tried to get him to let us know when he received the partially complete autopsy report, and he gave us a time frame of sometime last week. So we're scratching our head like, okay, so you interviewed everyone and came up to your conclusion in less than 5 days? That's miraculous. I mean, it took 150 days for you to get it.
My family knows that this is a cover-up.
Exactly.
I'm Tyrone West's mother. That was my sister's child. He was brutally beaten, maced, tased. So much was done to him. They had the audacity to look at our face and tell us this didn't happen. We want the complete autopsy from head to toe. Eyewitness account. Look me in my face. Eyewitness and told me what was done to my child. How dare you lie to me and tell me what's not done?
You know, State's Attorney Greg Bernstein has a history ever since he's been an officer of not prosecuting any police officer for any wrongdoings. And this is a pattern of his past behavior. Why would we want to trust him with what's going on in the future? Why should he be elected to office next year when he has not prosecuted or stepped forward on any of these misconduct, excessive force, and police brutality that's going on in the city? Because he denied the fact that just 2 weeks before the police murdered my nephew, that the same officer was just in court.
Officers
were just in court for beating Abdul Salam.
in the same neighborhood.
In the very same neighborhood.
And they would just stop and frisk that they're not saying anything about. You pull them over, supposed to be. How you going to drive fast down a block where you're approaching a stop sign? You're approaching a stop sign. If you're approaching a stop sign, what you going to do? Speed?
We were told us that he was driving below the regular speed.
It makes no sense. A cover up. You stop them for a stop and frisk, and you.
All right, y'all. So now I'm going to cut the video. Tawanda has let me know that the Zoom meeting is about to start. So I'm going to transfer everyone over to that now. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always.
A freedom fighter since the untimely death of her oldest brother, Tyrone West. Tawanda has testified at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. on numerous occasions for years against police brutality, lynching laws, and in support for Christopher Brown's law. Tawanda, with many others, helped get the gag order bill passed into law in 2020. Ms. Jones has been featured in documentaries with Charles Barkley and in Baltimore Rising. She's been on The Roland Martin Show and been interviewed by CNN. Additionally, Tawanda has appeared in Westmore's 5 Days, Baltimore Magazine, The Afro, New York Times, and The Washington Post. Tawanda is the founder of West Wednesdays, a weekly protest which has been ongoing for 370 weeks and is now virtual due to COVID-19. Last but not least, Tawanda is a child of God and a Christian woman. Next is Mr. Gregory Riddick Sr., founder of the Trill Foundation and a CPIC member. The Trill Foundation is a nonprofit organization in Baltimore that provides trauma-informed care services throughout the region. Substance abuse disorder, mental health first aid, peer support, suicide prevention, and financial literacy are the cornerstones of the foundation in which the Trill Foundation builds. The Trill Foundation has radical and a holistic approach which is uniquely designed and geared towards healing the souls and spirits of the population that is pierced, broken, and torn apart by pain, violence, and systemic racism. The next panelist is Dr. Paulette Williams-Tillery, who's the program director of Roberta's House in Baltimore City and Prince George's County. Dr. Williams-Tillery has a PhD and she has extensive experience educating future social workers in the academic setting, including over 15 years working with and impacting change for underserved populations. She has more than 10 years of program development and management training. Dr. Tillery is a social worker by training and is committed to working with individuals and communities who are impacted by grief, chronic trauma, and intergenerational trauma. She incorporates an eclectic approach to therapeutic modalities when working with individuals who have been impacted by post traumatic stress disorder and vicarious trauma. She currently oversees the Homicide Survivor Advocacy Programs at Roberta's House in Baltimore City, as well as in Prince George's County, where she provides services to individuals who are impacted by homicidal loss. And last but not least, we have Mr. Fred Jackson. And Fred Jackson is a former Baltimore City Sheriff's Department Internal Affairs Detective Chief and a current Civilian Review Board member of the Northwestern District. Mr. Jackson was born and raised in West Baltimore and attended Towson University. Mr. Jackson worked as a correctional officer for the Department of Juvenile Justice and was a Maryland Police and Correctional Training Commission certified police instructor prior to joining the sheriff's office. Mr. Jackson worked on several task forces in conjunction with the U.S. Marshal and other local police agencies. Mr. Jackson was promoted to sergeant, lieutenant, and then captain. He was the first commander of the Sheriff's Witness Protection Unit and the first commander of the Sheriff Special Response Team. He also commanded and or supervised the Sheriff's Office criminal and child support warrant units, field enforcement, district court communications, transportation, lockup, and domestic violence. Mr. Jackson's last assignment was as chief of the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office Internal Affairs Unit, where he not only supervised but was responsible for reconstructing and editing the General Order Manual until his retirement in December of 2014. That was a little bit out of order, but before we go on to our questions, I would also just like to thank the staff of the Civilian Review Board for all of their hard work making sure that the Civilian Review Board panels were okay, and they put together these questions that I am about to read to the panels. Now, the first question is for Miss Tawanda Jones. Miss Jones, what made you create West Wednesdays? And can you please tell us a little bit about West Wednesdays?
Yes, thank you for asking me that, and thank you for having me, and thank all the other panelists. But what started West Wednesday, unfortunately, was the untimely, brutal murder, the brutal lynching of my brother Tyrone West, who was brutally executed right here in Baltimore City on July the 18th, 2013. And for long years, 370 weeks, 2,590 days. My family, my supporters, we are family. The West Coalition, we have been fighting nonstop for accountability, not just for my big brother Tyrone West, because we know that these are not isolated incidents by far. It's systemically happening, and it's happening all around the world. And the way my family was mistreated, we had literally had to wait 154 days for our outgoing state's attorney, who, by the way, we got him out of office, Greg Bernstein, for disrespecting not only the West family, but Anthony Anderson family, all the families of police brutality. So that's how West Wednesday was started.
Thank you, Miss Jones. Dr. Tillery Williams, what advice would you give to Black and Brown people in America during this point in time on how to cope with issues concerning brutality and racism?
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for that question. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel, which I think is going to be a very interesting conversation, and hopefully we'll walk away with some insight. So I would say that the anger that we're feeling right now, when we look at TV and we see different types of trauma that's experienced by African Americans and other people of color, it's completely normal to be angry, right? Anger is something, it's a natural response when someone does something to us or someone hurts our feelings. It's normal to feel angry, but we have to look at how we respond. I would say to people, know your rights. Know your rights when you're pulled over by the police. Understand how to report injustices if you're facing an injustice. Have a way or a format in which you can process what's going on. Because a lot of times we hold things in, and that's what causes it to build up. There's a way that we have to respond. I think we live in a society that's reactive. Instead of being reactive, we have to take some steps back, take some deep breaths, and we must learn how to respond instead of reacting. Such as when a police officer pulls you over. There's a way, and I think for every African American mother, we teach our sons how to respond when they're pulled over. We say keep your hands in where the police can see that. Respect the police officers. Um, be clear about what you're doing and speak audible to them so that we won't cause a reaction. So sometimes it's hard, particularly when people are speaking to you in one particular way. But I think we need to change from automatically reacting, because a lot of us were taught to react rather than think. So what we do instead of thinking is that we do. We feel and we do. So I would say take a step back and process what's happening at that particular moment. We need to get involved. Get involved in your community. Know what's happening in your community. Get involved in different types of community activities. Seek help if you need help. If you understand that you have an anger problem and you know that problem is getting out of control, there are places, there are people that you can talk to be able to process your anger in the proper format. And if we're going to protest, think join protests that are peaceful. We're seeing people now that are a part of protests and they're being arrested, even though they're showing up peaceful in some places. But when we see that those protests become violent, what's the first thing that people say? There they are again. They're being angry. They are reacting. So I would say if you're going to get involved in a protest, establish a protest in which you want to go out and you want to be peaceful. We need to look at Dr. Martin Luther King. When he marched with a purpose. His purpose was to be peaceful, to get the point across. Were things automatically changed overnight? No, I don't expect that things are going to change overnight, but they will change. But we must be cognizant of the way that we respond. And we need to learn historical events. Know that this is not the first time that we're experiencing these type of times that we're living in. Historically, people of color, African Americans, indigenous communities have always faced some type of racial injustices. So we need to look back and be able to understand where we come from so that we can know where we're going.
Thank you, Dr. Tillery, for your perspective on that. Now I want to turn and get a different perspective, and that's from a former law enforcement officer. Mr. Jackson, my question to you is in two parts. Was it difficult working as a Black officer? And that's the first part. And the second part is, do you feel that the community shunned you, or was the community connected to you while you were an officer because of your race?
Well, that's kind of a two-part answer. First thing is that I was black before I was an officer. Being black in America, especially right now, is difficult because we're all looked at where our race is being weaponized for no reason other than just the fact of what we are. Being a police officer, yeah, it's difficult. But the difference between the two is I had a choice with that. I could choose to be a police officer, or I could choose to go into what my first profession was and done that, and I'd have been fine sitting in the background. But I did what was best for me to support my family. So yes, it could be difficult. But whatever you do, you should try to be the best at it. And
You have to have some type of humility. And as far as the second part of that, I got off track. What's the second part of your question, Emmanuel?
Unmute myself. Okay. The second part of the question was, do you feel that the community shunned you, or was the community, do you think they were connected to you because of your race?
That depends. Depending on what I was there communicating with the community for. At any one given day, you can be the best thing or the worst thing that any person in the community saw. If you're coming and they have a problem and you can solve it for them, then you're the best thing that ever got there. If you show up in the middle of something and they've already had at least one bad experience with a police officer, you can be the worst thing showing up. There are days when you're in the black community as police, whether you're black, white, or indifferent, you at any given day you're looked at highly or very lowly simply because you are an authority. And being black and being an authority does add a different level to it. But then you have to be mindful. What are you really here for? And if you're here to enforce the law and to help people, then you do that. No matter if you're getting cussed out, no matter if you're getting yelled at, no matter what's going on around you, you have to do what you were trained for. And a lot of things that happen with the police is not that they're not trained, they are very trained. They're trained in a lot of stuff. The problem comes in when they go into police culture and go against what they're trained to do. And that's where a lot of these things are coming from. There are ways to do things. You should never tell a citizen there's nothing you can do. There's always something you can do, even if you had to take them to where they can find the type of help that they need.
Thank you so much for your answer and the honesty in it. Mr. Riddick, for you, we've talked before, and I know that you've gone through some things in your own personal life and besides your professional life. The title of this panel is "I Can't Breathe: A Community Conversation on Policing and Equity." So one of the questions for you is, what are some of the mental health challenges that can occur when we talk about "I can't breathe"?
Well, thank you, Evangelist, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the panel. And a lot of mental health challenges are being as a black man and going through the things that I've been through in the community. And hearing "I Can't Breathe," it speaks to the challenges of not being able to voice my opinion and without it being significantly heard. It's like we're going to have to just to seek and recognize, I think, a personal transformation, because the racism runs deep, it's systemic. And what it does is not being able to really work like we need to, not being able to feed our family like we need to. It even goes over to a spiritual level, because the most important thing is that what the racism does to us, it's a matter of good and evil. And if it wasn't for the spiritual connection that I have with the Creator, I would be doing things that, from a reaction point of view, like Dr. Tillery has stated. And the thing is that whenever the racism and the trauma of it and the mental health aspect of it really kicks in and I don't realize it, then I'm going to act out. And there's a lot of these youth who here in the city in itself that are acting out because a lot of them don't understand why they just feel insignificant whenever it is a person's or any human's. Uh, it's a inherent uh, desire to feel significant in this earth. The gift that we have, God put a gift in all of us, and whenever that gift has not been found and operated from that level to help make the world a better place, uh, it's easy to be sidetracked and to get into survival mode and do what it takes to survive. And once these individuals, or speaking for myself and my son, uh, when you're working to eat, you have to do what you have to do to survive. And so the mental health aspect of it, it just really blows everything out of proportion because you really don't want to hear anything anyone has to say unless they're willing to help you eat or help you feed your family. So, getting back to the services, the challenges that I can't breathe. I mean, it's like, where do I go? What do I do? What kind of help do I have? Most black men don't want to talk about it. You know, I don't want to. We want to put up a front or of being strong whenever it's really eating us up. Our family, our best friends, our associates are dying. You know, and it's just like everything is overwhelming, and being that we don't feel significant and that we want to feel significant, we act out in a lot of different ways if we don't have uh, someone to or something to rein us in. And if our spiritual life is not, if we don't have that relationship with the Creator to help guide us and to give us that strength that we need, or if we don't operate to the level of that gift, we're going to react, and so many things will happen as we see, like within the Freddie Gray case, how, I mean, there's rioting, there was breaking, and I mean, it's all over the United States, you know. So, in order for us to be able to, as a whole, to be able to overcome and to be significant, we have to help each other. We have to teach each other. We have to train each other. Even those who, on the other end of the spectrum, is causing the systemic racism. Because if we don't teach them, like a relationship, I've heard people say, it's not my responsibility to teach you how to, uh, as far as to do the right thing. But when we're in a relationship, we have to teach people to love us, and we have to be taught how to love that person whom we are willing to love. You know. So the thing is that if we don't, well, there are those who don't want to love. There are those who want to keep, when it comes to good and evil, to keep their foot on our necks. You know. So, and when they are there and don't listen to us and don't allow us to be who we are and to operate from our gifts, it's just like, I can't breathe mentally, physically, spiritually, or emotionally. And I just act out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Riddick, for sharing that. This is really important to be heard. And I do
really
back to you, Ms. Jones, in a moment, and Mr. Jackson, but I feel like with what you said, I have to segue back to Dr. Tillery for a moment and then ask you what types of trauma apply to different situations when you deal with police brutality and racism. And Dr. Tillery, can you just tell us what types of trauma, um, explain them to the audience for me, just
Well,
briefly, if you will.
We've heard of the term PTSD, which was associated with veterans returning. Now that's no longer just associated with veterans. That's associated with people in the community. We're seeing post-traumatic stress that's being experienced, and that's being triggered by a terrifying event, and what that's accompanied by is flashbacks, insomnia, anxieties, um, thoughts, negative thoughts running through your head over and over and over again, uncontrollable thoughts. We're also seeing continuous stress. So post traumatic is after an event. But when you walk out your door and you see someone who's been murdered, I mean, talk about young children, they see it, they know how to process it. This is on a continuous basis. So we're also seeing from post traumatic stress, we're seeing continuous stress. So we're dealing with different types of trauma, vicarious trauma. Whenever I look at the TV and I see someone whose life has been taken at the hands of another person, whether it's a police officer or someone else, I can't help to feel or to think about my own son. I'm a mother of a black son. He doesn't live in Baltimore City, he lives in California. But there are a lot of events and different things that are taking place there also. So vicariously, I feel that. And when I work with survivors of homicide, vicariously, I feel that. I begin to feel what the men and women are going through when they're dealing with so much traumatic loss itself. So we can't help to think, what are people dealing with, particularly when they're being pulled over by the police department? What type of fear do they have when you're being pulled over? For example, if I'm pulled over by a police officer, the first thing that goes through my mind sometimes is what I do, what I say, knowing that I haven't done anything, but fear immediately comes up because vicariously, when I look at the TV, I see trauma. I see people who have been trauma. I see people who say, I was just pulled over by the police, if this is what he or she said or he or she did. So I begin to feel that vicariously. And a lot of times, people that work in the particular field, they deal with this. But also, people who have been impacted by trauma directly or indirectly feel this vicarious trauma. We're also looking at a new concept, but that came about in 2017 by Dr. Eckhart, and it's called urban trauma, in which he looks at centuries of dehumanization, centuries of racial inferiority and hate towards people of color. And then what he said is that it causes us psychological wounds. If you've ever been wounded psychologically, it just does not go away overnight. It takes time for us to process that kind of trauma, and it lives with us. Our minds are remarkable. We can take pictures every time something happens to us, whether it's good or bad. There's a picture that's taken, and it's stored in the back of our minds. And whenever something comes up that reminds us of that particular incident, that picture flashes right in front of our face. So a lot of times with racial injustices, those pictures are there, and we experience those things over and over and over and over again. And he also talked about, these things come and they are directly related to slavery, mass incarceration, all the crime and the community violence. This is what we see, this is what we hear. And I can't help to think about children. How are they processing this type of trauma? Because remember, it is a psychological wound. It stays with us. It does not go away overnight. It takes time for us to be able to understand, first of all, what's going on with us and to be able to process that. And we're also looking at intergenerational trauma that's passed from generation to generation. You can grow up in certain homes and be traumatized by different events that's happening there. And if there's no intervention being put into place, guess what? The next generation is going to pick up and experience the same type of trauma. Just like now, when we watch the TV and we see, like the young man that was shot in the back, what, not too long ago. When we see that, we internalize that. And as a mother or as just a person who's just caring and living in those particular types of communities, it goes inside of us and is deep. We bury it, we try to keep moving, but that's trauma because that's some type of event and it's triggered by a terrifying event. So we experience these things different, and we unknowingly sometimes pass it on to generation after generation after generation. We're also looking at racial trauma. Those things where it's cumulative, centuries and centuries of trauma that's being impacted, that Black people have been impacted by. Black hate, impoverished communities, again, lack of access and resources to different people, lack of education. I mean, just
Mhm.
to go, you look at a public school, go to a public school versus going to a private school. There's a difference there. There's some type of social inequality that we experience. So there's various forms of trauma, but trauma leaves us psychologically impaired until we understand what we're feeling, what we're dealing with. And it impacts us mentally as well as physically. When we look at research looked at those chronic stressors, those things that we experience over and over, how it also leads to physical problems. It leads to a direct relation to hypertension or diabetes. These are things that we see over and over and over in our communities, and sometimes we just simply don't understand where did it come from. Yes, it could be DNA, but when we look a little bit deeper, it can be linked to unresolved conflict, unresolved trauma that we are experiencing on a continuous basis.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Tillery. And, as we know, and I know you and Mr. Riddick and myself, we have attended the Rotary Academy. And, you learn a lot about trauma from that. And one of the things that I can proudly say is that Baltimore City has formed a trauma informed care task force as well to deal with the issues of trauma, to help residents deal with trauma as well.
Mhm.
um, I heard you mention a couple of times, Dr. Tillery, about television and the images that we get from television and the things that we see on television, and how it is traumatic. And I think sometimes we can get desensitized as well, from just seeing things. So it depends on the way we look at it. So my next question deals with things like that, and it's for Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones, for communities that are not over police, those residents often get their ideas and images of policing from television, the news, and the medias that rarely portray the real flaws in these systems. How does that, how do you think it impacts political will for police accountability and community perceptions of over police neighborhoods?
Okay, before I answer that question, I just want to give a little bit of feedback, and then I want you to ask me that question again so I can
Sure.
answer it.
Okay, sure.
So I wanted to give a little bit of feedback and all due respect to our queen, Dr. Tillery, and she was saying about being reactive and proactive type of thing, and and of course that is the best way to be, reactive. You basically be proactive and things of that nature, so that way your reaction changes. But I just wanted to say, for one, I disagree on the part about about the respected. The officers need to be taught to respect us. They're killing us. They're killing us, and it's not right, and it needs to stop. And then I'm glad you guys talked about post traumatic stress disorder. I want to talk about PTSD for us and living in a black community that is basic, and this is worldwide. This is not something that's just in Baltimore, but police trauma stress disorder. We have to worry about every time, and just like the sister said, even when she's pulled up, she's like, "Oh my God, I didn't do anything wrong." It should not be equivalent to Russian roulette when we're pulled over at the officer's discretion, rather he or she's having a bad day and they want to unleash. And as we see all the world of all this police brutality, down to Jacob, Mr. Jacob, that was just shot in the back 7 times in Wisconsin, shot in the back. He was breaking up a fight and then just walking to his car, shot in the back. But literally today, you had a vigilante come and shoot a teenager, come and shoot a maniac, come and shoot peaceful protesters, walk slam past the police. They didn't do anything, but then they go later and arrest them. Are you freaking kidding me? So let's talk about that respect. It's no respect for us, and I don't like the way the system tries to play us like police brutalities over here, racism, all this stuff is together, and it's equivalent to the highway of hell, regardless of what street you go down, whether it's and that's somebody being brutally murdered, fairly mistreated, and it's just not right. So I just wanted to unpack that real quick because I was like sitting and like kind of wavering over in my soul and my spirit. And you can ask me a question.
Okay. Let's see. The question was, for communities that are not over police, residents often get their ideas and images of policing from television, news, and media that rarely portray the real flaws in these systems. How does that impact political will for police accountability and community perceptions of over police neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for that, my queen. So basically, when you, to me, when I look at the media, right, and the way they report things, the media can be very deadly. They have the power to make innocent people look guilty and guilty people look innocent. And it's just really sad and bad. So when you're watching all type of things that all these atrocities happen to us on the TV, and then you don't even really have to necessarily see it on the TV, right? You can just literally go outside and see the way people are basically mistreated by officers, right? But with all that being said, and to answer your question, basically, when you have the media making the police officers and people making the police officers like, oh, they're heroes. You get what I'm saying? And this person, the victim, got what was deserving of it. Just like now down to, and this is a real conversation about I can't breathe. When my brother couldn't breathe, he was the first one that really struck to me, not the first victim, of course, but the first one that touched home when they snatched my brother when he couldn't breathe with David Lewis foot on his neck. But when you think about George Floyd, right? I think about the way he was murdered, and his killer is actually on bail now. He's out at the mall shopping, all type of things. Meanwhile, we're fighting for accountability and transparency, and it's none there. You get what I'm saying? So the way that, and that's why they try to come back with these little so-called bullcrap reform laws. We don't need a reform to me. Like I tried, like when my brother was murdered, literally I was like all for reform. I was showing up at City Hall, testifying for the cameras to be put on officers. I'm like, yeah, if it was a, if the person, if the police officer had a camera on him when they killed my brother, maybe that would have made a difference. But now I'm knowing that is not even true. You get what I'm saying? Because you can have all the video, and people pulled out video footage on my brother being murdered, but the police were allowed to come the very next day, snatch all the video footage, and my family have not to this day seen any video footage. So I say all that to say that it's a deadly game the way the media portrays things and the way people that sat back on their couch, watching this stuff and they don't know because it hadn't hit their home, especially the ones that are privileged. They don't even got to worry about if they're going to be murdered by street community violence or by a killer cop. It's just way too much stress.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Jones, for sharing that. Mr. Jackson, the next question. A criminological theory by James Q. Wilson and George Kelly, the broken windows theory. Um, I'm sure you're familiar with that. So my question is, um, do you think that over policing can directly contribute to blight in community? And if so, or whether or not you do, how does the broken windows policing theory, how can it create more broken windows?
It does all the time. That broken windows theory, when the guy took, you're talking about that study the two doctors did when they put the one car up in New York and the other car in California and watched them get broken up, and then oh, nobody's picking up the glass and all of that. And work. And this, to me, that whole thing right now, the way it works now, is that people are using the police use that as an excuse of why there are all so many of them sitting in one neighborhood. Just like what Mr. Riddick said, you have all of these young black men and women who have no way out. They don't have any hope. They don't have any money. They don't have any jobs. They don't have any hope at all. And they have to feed a family, just like people who are working. So when the police come across these folks and they're doing these little petty things, there's got to become an understanding of what that person's circumstances are. And if you don't have, if that police officer doesn't have an understanding of what that person's circumstances are, they're going to continue to just bash them around like you're living in a town full of animals. The other thing is, the police really need to live here. Everybody's worried about, you should take a ride along with the police. Their job is so hard. Ride along with the police. Police need to ride along with the community. The police don't ride along with the community. They don't want to see where these folks live at. They don't want to be in your house overnight. They don't want to hear the gunshots out the window that I still hear where I'm at right now in West Baltimore. It doesn't make any difference what they say about ride along with us to see what we deal with. Nobody wants to see what you deal with because you're leaving here every day. You come here, if you lived here, you would buy into the community. You would talk to the people that live next door to you. You would talk to the people who live across the street. You would, when you get up in the morning, you would put your clothes on and you say, step outside and say, now I'm going to take care of my house. My house is a city. I'm going to go out here and take care of it. These guys, there's a ton of them that all live across the state line up in Pennsylvania or way out in the county. They're making all this money down here in the city. Then they take their money back to the county and out into Pennsylvania or wherever they live at, and they live it up. So when they get up in the morning and they put their uniform on and look in the mirror, they're going, great. Now I got to go into this guy's, go down to this city and deal with that. I'll be glad when the day is over with. But for me, my day didn't end when I got home. When I got home, my neighbors would be knocking on my door all the time. They would always ask for help. Where can I do this? Where can I do that? The police officers who work in this town to be made to live in this town. And until, I think it was in the 70s, they did. But they changed the law. Oh, no, they can get out of town now. If you need peace where you live, you make peace where you live. And there's some people who will never get the opportunity to make peace or to live in peace where they are. So that broken window theory, I've seen it off and on, off and on, off and on. But the people who solve the problems where the windows are broken are not the police. It's the people who live there decide we don't want this place to be messed up. So there's got to be a bigger investment in the community and not more police. We're proving up in Portland where force creates more force. Oh, they're not acting right. Well, these beatings will continue until morale improves. It doesn't work. It never has worked to go out and run around and beat people more and more and more. And, they're going to be scared of us now. Black folks don't do that. We're resilient. We get a thicker skin and then we step back up. And that's what's got to happen. I still get afraid when the police pull me over. I don't carry around a badge. I refuse to be running around here toting a pistol just because I can. It's just no need to it. The police will pull me over in a minute. And they don't pull me over because I got bad tags or I got a funny looking car. They pull me over because I'm black in a black neighborhood. And it's, to me, I get incensed when that happens. But yes, I do understand. And I do know about Miss West's brother. And I still have the same opinion about what happened there. They weaponized that man to the nth degree. He died because people were scared. Those cops were scared of not just black men, but they're scared of large black men. And I keep hearing it all the time. Oh, he's big. He's a menace. He's big because he's been eating well this week. Leave him alone. There was nothing sickly about Tyrone West. He did not need to die like that. And at every police academy across this nation, those police officers are taught about if you're going to seduce somebody, not to put their hands behind their back and all the time and sit on them because they can't breathe. It's positional asphyxiation. I can't pronounce it, but that's what it is. And that's what killed him. And they won't admit it because it's going to cost money. And that's the problem. They wanted the problem to go away. And I'm glad that you're not allowing the problem to go away, Ms. West, because it is time for that to stop. I think I may have lost track of what you asked me.
No, I think you covered it very well, sir. Thank you for your candor and honesty. It is greatly appreciated. We have a couple of more minutes, and I would really, really like to just ask a couple of more questions. But I'm going to ask our panelists. I hate to give you a time limit, but I'm going to have to. Mr. Riddick, in 1 minute or less, please answer this question. As a community advocate, how do you think the relationship between can be healed between law enforcement and the community, specifically in Baltimore City?
Well, as it's been stated, transparency and accountability for one, because the police, like Mr. Jackson said, they do what they do, then they go back home. They're not invested in the community, you know. And it's like Miss Miss what's your name? Miss Tawana, forgive me. Yeah, Miss Jones. Like she was saying as well. This transparency and accountability, they have to invest in our community, you know, financially. It takes that type of change. Now we're working on, I'm on the Pacific Crew, and we're working on retraining the police. But it's about a mentality and it's about a culture. This been happening for over 400 years. And it's not going to be done or finished or taken. It's not going to be, it's going to take more than 3 months to get this done. You know, we all going to have to want to sit down and have this conversation and want this change. And for those who don't want the change, it's just like everyone has to pick a side, whether it's good or whether it's evil, and go to war. That's the bottom line. That's what I see. And the truth behind that is that if we're going to love one another and respect one another, or we're going to hate one another and destroy one another.
Thank you, Mr. Riddick. I appreciate your response. Really, Dr. Tillery, I have a question for you from an audience member. The question is they said it's interesting that Dr. Tillery is telling people to protest the same way we have been for decades, and you reference Martin Luther King. If those strategies work so well, then why do we still have the same problem that we do? It's more of a comment question.
Okay, well, let me go back. Let me start here with Miss Jones first, what you said there, respect. I would say respect, you're right, respect is mutual. So when I say respect, I can only talk about respect on my side and what I say to my child to get him to live the next day. So yes, I think that's a given that we know that respect is mutually. You know, we do have police officers that are disrespectful, um, and we can't control that. But I can control me and how I respond to another individual. So we need to look at those things that we have some control over and those things that we don't have control. And when I respond back to what the person is saying in marching peacefully, there were changes that were made, you know, when we marched peacefully. You know, so we're still dealing with issues. This is not something, as I said earlier, that's going to go away. We still have to fight for our freedom. We're still in the midst of the situation that's going on a daily basis. So it's not going to go away. So unfortunately, people of color have to always fight for their space. We all always have to fight to be right. But there's a way that we can do that fighting by getting involved. One of the things I do and I look at, and I think it's important that we understand and work with police officers in training them. I work with the CPIC committee. I'm a part of the training process. I do think there's a lot that needs to happen on the side of the police officers. I do think there needs to be more training. Conversations like this brings awareness to those particular issues, and it lets people know, not just the community, but police officers know also that there need to be trained. You know, so if we have a lot of situations where people are put into situations they're just not ready for it. They're not, you know, they come to work maybe with attitudes. We all may have come to work with an attitude before, but we have to understand how we need to check ourselves and how we need to understand what's happening in the community. So there were strategies that worked back then, and there are strategies that can still work today. So I am not a person that's going to be a condolence of violence, that we need to go out and protest and protest and tear up different things in our community. No, what does that solve? We need to look at what can we do to change policy. This is what this is about. What can we do to look at the police department and change and retrain the people that are working there? And I think somebody said police officers living in the community. Yes, that will give them a different perspective on what the African American community is dealing with and what they're going through. And I see people every day that are dealing with homicide survivors. I hear the pain in them every day. And so I am able to empathize with those individuals to help those people hopefully get through this grief process. We never get over it, but we will get through it. So there's things that we can do to actually be able to help other individuals. And I do think that we need, when we say reform, reform means training people to better be able to serve in these positions so they understand the communities that they have to go in, so they understand the people and some of the different things that the people in the communities are actually dealing with. So I'm talking about accountability. I'm that man in the mirror. I'm looking at myself first. And then we go out and we spread that abroad. And we teach people. You have to teach people how to treat you. And that is a part of the training process. We all have to do that. And we model that kind of behavior. I'm sorry I went a little bit over.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tillery. Thank you. So you talked about policy, and that's going. I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson. Um, what are some policy recommendations for policing in the 21st century, sir? And we've got you, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Jones a couple of questions. Mr. Jackson, give us a couple of policy recommendations for 21st century policing.
A couple of things that are going wrong now with policing is this. It's been the militarization of the police department. When you talked about television, nobody wants to look or be the police. They want to go out and wear cop pajamas and jump out of cars and run around with 50 guns on themselves. And if you call somebody because, even if it's silly, to get a cat out of a tree, you need SWAT to show up to get a cat out of a tree. You do not. They need to look like police. That's the first thing. As far as change, we got to change the attitude of the police because all this television cop stuff is making them bad. One of the policies that need to go into effect is make the police look like police. As far as training, the training is there. I'm a former police trainer, and I can tell you they are being told all the time. One of the things I used to tell them is when you run upon somebody on a call, you may be the first police officer that this human being has ever seen. What you do is going to mold his or her attitude for the rest of their lives. If you show up and you're a clown, they're going to think all police are clowns. If you show up and you're professional, then they're going to think police are professional. It may work, it may not work, depending on what's happened within their family. But you got to give it the best shot to do that. And stop police from dressing up like they're getting ready to blow up a house. That at all places, that's what they're doing. And they feel like they got to live up to the uniform they're wearing. They don't have to wear that. They need to wear the uniform of the day, which is a police uniform, and perform like a police officer. Most of them don't even have a notepad to write your name down. They need to have that. They need to act right. And all the training in the world will not help somebody that's caught up in police culture. Police culture is like, we just gonna do what we do. And we ain't worried about what they said in the academy. That's not the way life goes. I absolutely hate to hear that. I hate to see it. I hate to hear it. And they need to stop. And just like I said, the police need to ride along with us. We don't need to ride along with them. We know what they're doing because we're dying in droves. They need to come and stay with us. If the community could create a coalition and say, okay, look, we're willing to let this cop stay in my house for the next couple of days and see what I go through every day. He can ride to work with me. He can come home with me. He can watch my children standing around crying because there ain't no food in the refrigerator. They can stand here and go through all of that with me. But you have to treat people like people and not like a work product because it's not that.
Thank you so much, sir. And I have a final question for Ms. Jones. Um, since the deaths of George Floyd and others, can you quickly share some of the events you've been participating in and just briefly tell us what's going on with you in the future for civil rights?
Okay, thank you for asking me that question. And I just want to thank everybody on the panel tonight because it's been amazing, like real talk. I love it. This real quick to my queen sister, like with the respect piece, I definitely my and then I think it hurted me more because my brother was real respectful when he pulled over and said, "Good evening, officers. Why are you pulling me over?" And they said, "This is what we do to you, N-words." And the beating began with Louise, who is now promoted to sergeant, that's still a violent repeat offender that's working in my community, right? And Chapman, they're the first two in the unmarked car that started killing my brother. But could you repeat the question really fast?
Sure. I said, since the death of George Floyd and others, what are some of the events you've been participating in, and what's going on with Tawanda Jones for the future in regard to civil rights?
Oh, so what's been going on? Glad you asked. Just yesterday, shout out to Councilman Ryan Dorsey and all the councilmen and women. We were working on renaming a statue, the Columbus statue, right here in our city. And it went through the first chamber and whatnot. But we're trying to have that memorial renamed after the victims of police brutality, which is well needed, well deserved. So that was one. That was yesterday. And then also at the beginning of this year, beginning of all this foolishness, the pandemic and everything else, the West Coalition, shout out to the West Coalition, shout out to ACLU, Runners for Justice, Jews for Justice, Not Without Black Women, and Councilwoman Shannon Sleeve, and Council President Brandon Scott for basically sponsoring and pushing our gag order bill, which allows now it's law and it allows people to actually talk about their case without being jeopardy of taking the money back. So we were working on a whole lot. And as far as, in the future, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing until my coffin drops. I'm never going to stop fighting for police accountability. And right now, I'm on my way tomorrow. I'm actually on my way to DC to go to. And I heard my sister Queen mention about Dr. King, and we're doing the big march. And we're right now. We're demanding that they open every case. We don't know about Al Sharpner's agenda, right? Because we don't care about you, me, the Al Sharpners of the world. They are the problems. We're here to solve the problem, and that's accountability because every case matters. And just real fast, keep in mind Jarrell Gray, who we've been fighting for accountability, Derek Graham, Anthony Anderson, Jamal Taylor, Kevin Cooper, Johnson, Corinne Gaines, Gary Gray Hopkins, Indian Kager, Corey Val, Corey Ball, I'm sorry, the list goes on for accountability.
Thank you very much, Miss Jones. I think somehow you froze up from us.
Yes, she is.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dr. Tillery, please give us like two takeaways to assist in restoring mental health, and we're done.
I would say just understanding your triggers. We all know that we have specific triggers. I would say reach out, when you need help, when you need to talk to someone. There's individual therapy, there's also group therapy formats. So we need to be cognizant in that. A lot of times we hold things within. It is time to start processing. It's time to start talking about those things that we don't have control over.
I appreciate each and every one of you for your time and the conversation. You brought so many different perspectives, and it was much needed. Thank you all very much on behalf of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights Civilian Review Board. Peace to you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Free Keith Davis Jr. Thank you. Free Keith Davis Jr. Free Keith Davis Jr. Thank you. Free Keith Davis Jr.
All right, you're all clear. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Mr. Jackson, can I ask Mr. Jackson a question?
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, you can. I have to do something. maybe I need to get your number. I could probably
you,
get it
everybody, for
from
tuning in.
Miss Evangelist.
I'll give you his number. Yes, I will.
Make sure
Yes,
that you
Fred.
tune in
Okay,
next
which
week.
we'll be
We'll
talking
doing another West
to
Wednesday,
about
and we
police
can't stop.
officers
We won't
and
stop until
about specific types of training, because it is
are in
to
cell
me, I
blocks.
know you guys are trained, but
Mic
you need
check.
on